Welcome back to another episode of Railfan Landon podcast edition. Episode 11 is brought to you by myself. I'm Lance Doma, and with me as always is
Railfan Landon.
Landon. We're heading over to the other side of the big lake today in our episode, right?
Yes.
Over to my homeland. So today's rail is
The Milwaukee Road.
Milwaukee Road Rail Line. So this was an old rail line. Now, I know this line personally, but in the modern sense. So modern day, the Milwaukee Rail Line, the original run, is not tracks, and it has gone the way of many old rails, right? It's a recreational path, right?
Yep.
Bike path, if you will. Now, I actually used to live in a small town in Wisconsin, Lake Mills, in between Madison and Milwaukee. And I used to regularly go onto the old Milwaukee Road and run and get in my miles. By the way, beautiful scenery along there. The small town I lived in had a really nice lake, and that rail cut right in between two lake areas, and it was really a gorgeous run. I enjoyed it greatly. But heading back in time, getting the DeLorean, and let's get way back, if you know my Back to the Future reference on that, one of my favorite movies of all time, and set of movies as it would be.
Yeah.
But we're gonna go back in time, and it's gonna be like old West time. So we're getting back into the 1800s, the 19th century, when this all got off and running, right?
Yep.
Rail expansion at that point, big time money, big time business.
Yes.
You had Milwaukee, the original large city in Wisconsin, by the way, and you had this new capital city, Madison, but there was not a rail that was connecting them directly and servicing those two major metropolitan areas. So in comes a proposal to connect them, right?
Yes.
All right. So the tracks they started laying, actually, now the proposal came in 1847, right? And was green lighted, but the actual track didn't get laid until a few years later.
Yeah, track got laid by 1854.
Was the completion of it, right?
Yes.
And it started, the actual track laying was 1851, I think, right?
Yes.
So in Waukesha, Wisconsin, yeah, and it actually connected. Now, did it actually get into Madison proper, like into the actual city? I wasn't sure.
I think it was more country, rural area.
Outside of Madison, there's a suburb of Cottage Grove, and I know that as far as the bike path goes, I know it reached through there. So I'm wondering if it was about that. But a short run, nonetheless, getting near to.
Yeah.
Interesting company. It was a real rise and a real crashing fall in the end, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So the company gets going, 1854. Everybody's celebrating, right? You get, on May the 23rd, you get 2,000 people from Madison and the surrounding area. They watch the arrival of the first passenger train, and everybody celebrates, right? Well, that was doing pretty good, and that was fine enough. However, and they kept growing, even up till by 1890. They weren't just a small Wisconsin rail, correct?
Yes, they weren't.
So they were servicing what other states at that point?
They were servicing Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, and South Dakota, and Upper Peninsula, Michigan.
Even reaching up to the UP. What I know is the Midwest, personally.
Yeah.
Trolls everywhere will be shaking their fist at me for that. I deserve it. But yeah, I mean, we're talking true upper Midwest. However, to be competitive, that wasn't enough.
Yes.
So the leaders of the company eyed to keep on expanding west. And the directors thought that was going to help them remain competitive. And that might be true. It also is what led to the demise in the long run, because this is not a railroad we're talking about as a modern rail. This is a defunct, and actually long ago, So they did a survey. They said, let's go west and let's go all the way, man. We're going Pacific coast, right?
Yes.
Which makes sense if you want to be competitive. You already are running through the northern kind of line. You know, if you get into South Dakota, you're getting fairly far north. Keep on heading. You head due west, and you're going to run into Seattle area pretty quick. Now some of that vision. So they did the survey, comes back, and they said, well, it's going to cost you. It's not going to be cheap. But they said $45 million, which in our modern money comes out to about $1.33 billion. Now, that seems like quite a bit, but picture modern day being able to expand and cover that much territory with transportation and that, like, imagine that. That's not a huge price tag, I would say. I think that's pretty reasonable. And that's what they saw. They said, yeah, let's do this. However, that was a 1901 estimate.
Yes.
By 1905, the board approved this expansion. However, the estimate had gone up to 60 million. That is a 33%, like a 33% increase over that 4 years ago estimate.
Yeah.
And instead of seeing the writing on the wall there, they forged on. And this is where, again, when you get into doomsday prepping here, people, for this is their doomsday coming. So they got to work on it because nothing stops American expansion, right? However, they ran into some financial difficulties.
Yes.
And the Pacific extension, and they ended up having to do electrification, which is another thing. So all of a sudden, this guy invented, all these people are inventing things, and all of a sudden you need electricity. And that's what really cranked the cost up. And what was originally a 45 million turned 60 million, now ballooned to $257 million by 1913. Well, I don't know about you, but if I go into a project and I have to spend 4 times as much as I had planned, I might have to go looking for some cash flow, and that's what they did.
Yes.
So this is getting slightly before World War I, by the way. So this wasn't an idea that was out there fully yet. And they said, you know how we could cover our costs right now? We could sell bonds.
Yep.
Great idea. And people were like, yeah, I'm going to invest in the railway, right? Like, who wouldn't at that time? Who wouldn't invest in the railway? It's booming. You're making a ton of money. Oh yeah. And you have this company, the Milwaukee Rail, is saying, hey, we have done studies and we are gonna be rich, guys. This is the wave of the future. Everybody's gonna be taking rails. Well, sometimes you overestimate your sales goals,
Yeah.
and that is what happened. So they did not have nearly the traffic they had pictured in their original. And remember those bonds that they were, selling out? Well, you have to pay that money back, and often with interest, right? Is how that works.
Yep.
That's why people buy them, because they're like, it's an investment. I'm gonna get my money back and then some. And when that came through in the early 1920s, they quickly ran out of their cash.
Yes.
Because when you all at once sell all these bonds, that means when they come to the end of their 10 years down the road and you got to pay it back, everybody wants their money all at once as well. And if you don't have all that money, guess what? You go bankrupt. And that's basically the story of the Milwaukee Railroad, right? You get kind of what we've seen with a lot of the railroads. They take some measures to try and keep their cash flow going, right?
Yeah.
But honestly, 1927, they tried launching a second edition. There's these desperation moves, but they were in 1925. They declared bankruptcy.
Yes.
And another, Chicago, Milwaukee, St. Paul, and Pacific Railroad kind of reorganized, and you move from there. But long gone at that point is Milwaukee Railroad
Yes.
in 1925. And it's, what it did, though, was it did establish a significant set of tracks from east to west, from even from, let's call it what we call Midwest to the far west coast, and those lines were all still there. And then for years after, that was used by others, right? But so there you go. The once pride and joy in 1847, by 1925 is out the door. So 78 years, if I'm doing my mental math later.
Yeah.
The Milwaukee Railroad is no more.
Hmm.
And then fast forward a few more decades, and there I was putting in my miles on a lovely gravel path that was once a rail line, right?
Yep.
All right. So
one more thing.
Yeah.
Before they tore up the line, as soon as the company went on bankruptcy, they had 11,248 miles of track that they had built.
11,000.
Yes.
Did they tear that all up?
Most of it's gone. Either turned into a rail bike trail or just gone.
That's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can you imagine if there was an interstate system like that we drive on, and all of a sudden it was privately owned and some company just went bankrupt, and we just tore up 11,000 miles of interstate? You know what I mean? Like that'd be the comparison. That is incredible to imagine, right? I mean, that's almost unfathomable. Also to note about this, the company's original maps showed 5 mountain crossings. 5 different ways they cut through the Rocky Mountains. And imagine laying those lines and
yeah, they had to use major TNT dynamite and
correct. And again, we're talking all steam power.
Yeah.
That's probably almost all steam power. Maybe at the very end they were cutting with some more of the gas engine stuff, but it had to be an incredible feat of mankind to get that done.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Landon, is there anything else we missed on that that you think is very important or noteworthy?
No,
otherwise, we'll leave it up to some of the rail fans. If you have some experience or knowledge on the Milwaukee Rail, we'd love to hear about it a little bit. Do comment. We do check before our shows, so if you have any thoughts or ideas you want to share forward, do let us know.
Real quick, one more thing. Shout out to my friend who has a cool model train layout. His name is Bill.
All right, Bill. Shout out to you, Bill. We hope you listen, and we hope you have a great day.
And he has a nice model train layout of more Washington part, all the way almost like the whole state from Seattle to Washington.
Wow.
The old Milwaukee Road line that's an HO scale.
Okay, well, maybe he'll be one of our commenters. That'd be great. Well, on a beautiful sunny day in Holland, Michigan today, we're going to sign off, yeah?
Yep.
All right, well, for the Railfan Landon podcast edition, as always, I'm Lance Doma, and with me, and now out,
Railfan Landon out.